Hello again, this is Robbo. This is an essay that I could not find. It is the third part of the Rocky Horror Picture Show essays. This is tentatively titled, Janet's Legs Are Like Peanut Butter, They're Smooth and Creamy and Easy to Spread. So here is that part of the other blog entry about Rocky Horror Picture Show Revisited. I said I was going to write about Janet. I feel like I might be mistaken to say anything regarding Janet because I am not biologically female. Whether or not I am really feminine in my mind does not really enter into a discussion of what constitutes the actions and desires of a cis woman. I have always maintained that I am either about halfway male or halfway female in my mind, but these days I feel much more like a eunuch, neither male nor female. This makes me think of Riff Raff, for some reason, who, in Rocky Horror Picture Show, really seems to represent the tendency in society for lethal force. It's the characteristic that cops have to have, that part of society that enforces behavior at the level of lethal violence. Riff Raff might have fit well in a modern SWAT unit. His ability to have the shot and take out a target without hesitation or regret very high. These kind of men also like to drop large bombs out of jet fighters and then say, touchdown. But I digress. It is very interesting to me that Susan Sarandon's first role was Janet. Who can ever watch a Susan Sarandon movie without thinking about Janet? In Rocky Horror Picture Show, everyone but Brad hates Janet. Why? I want to hesitate to rush into that question and look back at the days when I first saw Rocky Horror Picture Show in Fort Worth, Texas in 1979. What were my friends like in those days? Who were the people in Texas that went to see Rocky Horror Picture Show, and why were they there? Most of them were there to get drunk or high. It was a cult event. Every week we would go, and every week it would be the same. Strangely enough, a lot of cowboy types would go see it. But mostly the friends I had were your average ne'er-do-well hippie freak types who listened to AC/DC and claimed the name of the band meant something that it really didn't mean. I was, for the most part, totally clueless about my gender identity or my sexuality. I was a late bloomer. I never had sex until I was 17. And that wasn't that great. I thought about sex all the time, and it seems like I must have been a terrible candidate for it, because I never had any. No one was really interested in writing the Robbo until I turned 27. My friends who went to see Rocky Horror Picture Show were all outcasts and loners. We were a gang of outcasts and loners. Rocky Horror Picture Show brought us together. I say it is because the movie had everything that a rebel in the 70s could want. It had sex. It had rock and roll. You could get high or drunk at Rocky Horror Picture Show. There were even cops there, watching. They didn't care. It was completely bizarre. As Monty Python puts it, and now for something completely different. It was different, all right. To the crowd I grew up with at Rocky, Janet represented what she most obviously is in the film. A slut. This is what everyone screams at her in the theater when she comes on the screen. But wait, isn't it a double standard to say that Janet is a slut when Frankenfurter has slept with at least half of the characters in the movie? And as unmanly as Frankenfurter is, why does he still seem to get the protection of just being a guy who is enjoying sowing his oats rather than being someone who is actually looked down on for enjoying multiple partners? Janet represents the girl in school who everyone hates. She is Miss Perfect. The reason we hate her is there is this pretense about her that she would never be so debased as to really enjoy sex. But she does. Oh yeah, she likes it all right. But where Brad was raised to never think about sex outside the box of proposing to Janet and marrying her, Janet seems to have been thinking about sex a lot. She just doesn't talk about it. This is what she is not allowed to do in the 1950s Christian upbringing that she got. In fact, if you think about it, all those moms in shows like Leave It to Beaver and even the Brady Bunch, these women never had sex except to conceive children. God forbid they should ever want to have an orgasm. This is where I really start to tread on thin ice with the feminists. No matter what I say, I have a dick, and that makes me male. Feminists really want to hold on to that gender binary because it affords them power. If they were suddenly not women, they could no longer claim they did not have equality. But to them, if you say you are a woman in a man's body, they still reject you even after you become post-op. So it's hard to wrap your head around all the characters and truly what they represent because of all the taboos and even prejudice around the topics. It's not okay for Janet to like sex and want to have multiple partners. It's not okay for Brad to decide that he is really gay. It's not okay for Frankenfurter to believe he is a woman and want to be one. Personally, I think what's really not okay is to have people like Riff Raff enforcing the law. All of this is at the same time what makes Rocky Horror Picture Show so entertaining, timeless, and pertinent to today in our present age. If there is a lesson to be learned from Rocky Horror Picture Show, I think that is what it is. I think that what is so ironic is that even though it is presented in such outrageous satire, it points to all the things that are important to be looked at by people today. What do I really believe about myself? Why must I let society dictate what I believe? Who has the right to tell me I cannot identify my own gender or sexuality? How can I truly be happy if I'm not honest about these things with myself, no matter what anyone says?